What's up, everybody, and welcome back to another video from Pink Tourmaline. And today we are tackling a crazy video that I found last week. I've been trying to figure out exactly how to make this video because this is the first time that I've come across a video since I started this channel that has actually caused me distress and actually worried me. Let me explain. When I first discovered near-death experiences and all the testimonies of all these people, man, it was like such a heavy load lifted from me because I'm like, okay, finally we have some answers. We have people leaving and coming back and retelling very similar accounts of what happened. Obviously, there's going to be different variations based on interpretations. I think people sometimes see different things based on their belief systems. And I think that's not by accident. I think that's by design to make what other folks have said or other folks have written about is, let's say, if you might have one particular religious faith, you might see somebody from that faith first when you pass on. And it's, again, the point is to make you feel comfortable as you're leaving this earth and going into the astral or into the ethereal. But anyways, overall, you hear a lot of common themes. You hear a lot about life reviews. You hear a lot about we're taught, why are we here? The primary message is to learn. And you get these like beautiful messages over and over, and it makes sense. And so you're like, okay, all the stuff we go through on this planet, like there's a reason for it. It's to educate our souls. That made a ton of sense to me. And eventually when we move on, we may come back or we may reincarnate here or somewhere else. Like all that made sense to me as a process to continue evolving spiritually and grow. And I also kind of assumed that once we leave the body, we now have like this connection to the source, God, whatever it is, that is no longer hindered. And like it's intentionally hindered here. There's like they call it the amnesia that you have when you come into this body and come into this life. So you can be like tabula rasa. But then once you're released again, you're back connected to infinite knowledge. And I say all this because my assumption is what all the lies and the games and all the trickery and the conspiracies and all these things that exist on this planet, I felt faded away, of course, or not even possible in the ethereal, because we just have mind-to-mind connection, and we basically, that's not a thing out there. It's just pure truth, pure love, pure connection. But then I saw this interview with David Icke last week, and I want to share it with you guys because I have to. It's unpleasant if it's true. And I don't want to believe it's true. I actually don't believe it's true, but I wanted to share it with you guys regardless, because like I said, this is an explorative journey for me, and I'm trying to learn as I go and listen to all points and perspectives and dissect it through the lens of logic. And so I'm going to do that right here, but I've never heard anybody else say this. And the one thing that worries me is that he references Monroe from the Monroe Institute, which is a place that I'm very fascinated by and a place that I hope to go to some point in the near future. And I know there's a lot of knowledge there. And he references Robert Monroe, the founder of the Monroe Institute. That makes me a little worried that maybe there is more credibility to what David Icke is saying here. But we're going to get into the video now, and I'm going to play it for you. And then I'm going to talk about it afterwards. And I'll give you my take as to why initially right now, my logic is telling me that I don't believe there's merit to what he's saying, meaning that what is experienced in a lot of these near-death experiences is a second simulation, is more stuff to confuse us and to entrap us, which is just almost like too much for me to handle. Now, why is David Icke even coming back on my radar? Like I remember hearing about him years ago, and he was like touring. He's written lots of books, and he's got some conspiracy theories that I think have just gone too far, where for most people where he's been somewhat dismissed, but he's got a lot of people that still believe in what he said. Well, why is he coming back? I feel like now into the mainstream, because he's been saying for a very long time to anybody who could listen that there was this weird cult running the planet, and that they were into, stuff that you can't really say on YouTube, but they're into really, really dark stuff. And it seemed a little crazy. It seemed very crazy. And then all the stuff with Epstein is coming out, and it seems like he's been vindicated. Like it's true. It's insane. So you have to give this guy credit for the message that he'd been preaching for so long, and so long, that just seems so crazy. And now a lot of it seems to be true, that a lot of the people concentrated at the top seem to have this common perversion. It's crazy. It's crazy. So we have to listen, and we have to do our due diligence here. Anyways, without further ado, let me play the clip, and then we are going to talk about it after David Icke says what he says.
Is reincarnation. And this gateway process of the US military kind of came to the conclusion in its report that reincarnation is actually real, because what's reincarnating is not the body, it's consciousness. It's a state of awareness, a state of consciousness. Some people call it the soul, although that's only one level of it. And so you have this situation where, or it's certainly questioned in my mind, is when you leave the body, like in a near-death experience, or you leave permanently, what happens then? Are you then out of the simulation, out of the Loosh production machine? Because if you were, because of what I've just said about the challenging lives that so many people have, the great majority, if you left the body at the end of an experience of human, surely you would say, well, I'm not going back there.
Right.
Stop that for a game of soldiers. That's horrible.
Right. You gave me the experience of being a paraplegic for the last 60 years. Why would I want to go back to that again?
Exactly. So then I really got into this whole, what the hell is that all about?
Okay, so I'm going to jump in right here because I disagree with this line of thinking from all the near-death. And by the way, to David Icke's credit, he said he studied lots and lots of near-death experiences. So he said, if you have a tough life, why in the heck would you want to go back? From my understanding, from what I've gathered from all the near-death experiences and the books that I've read thus far, again, early in my journey, but from what I've gathered is, yes, life is difficult, but that's the point. It's through the difficulties, it's through the suffering that the soul actually learns and evolves. Now, could this be an elaborate trap? I think that's what he's going to get to in a second, right? Like, why would you come back? We're actually being fooled or manipulated, which is a crazy thought, really distressing thought, to imagine that once we leave our bodies, we're still vulnerable to trickery and things like that. But I don't know if I buy into that, because and there's more reasons why I disagree with this potential take, but you could also explain it away saying, yeah, it's difficult, but that's the point. It's just like we take on challenges in life. We're coming back, and we don't always come back here. We don't always come back to this planet. This planet is a particularly difficult planet. That's everything that I've learned about from both near-death experiences and from Journey of Souls and from these other books that I've read as well thus far, is that Earth in particular is a very, very tough place to incarnate. And so once you get to a particular level and you maybe don't need this burst of growth or this burst of challenges, you don't incarnate in these places where there's this much negativity, where there's this much trickery and lies and deception and all these other crazy things. But we incarnate here by choice, my understanding, again, because our soul needs that extra bump. So we put ourselves really through the ringer by coming here. And then when we don't need it anymore, my understanding is anyways that we don't incarnate here anymore. Maybe at some point we don't incarnate in general in this physical realm, in the universe, in the multiverse, whatever it may be. So I don't think that you can say just by virtue of the fact that, hey, it's difficult, I just went through this horrible thing, why would I go back to it? Well, it's the same thing. If you go to a boxing class or a workout class, it's terrible. Well, why would you go back? Because I want to continue to get stronger. I want to continue to get better. I want to keep putting myself through these trials and tribulations to improve myself. So anyways, if that is the main crux of his argument, like, this doesn't make sense, why would you keep going back? I don't find that to be a strong argument. So anyways, I'll let him continue.
And again, I write in the books in terms of the detail, but basically what you have is another level of this simulation, which is the astral dimension. And the idea is that when consciousness leaves the body, it enters this astral dimension, okay, but they don't want you going any further, because if you do, you're out of their control and thus out of their Loosh machine. They want you to reincarnate.
When he's talking about Loosh, so let me just explain this principle if you guys haven't heard it. Loosh is a blanket term for negative emotions, negative energy. So his theory is basically that there are other entities. This is going real crazy, but real deep, but interdimensional beings that we can't necessarily see or interact with in these dimensions that our senses like allow us to perceive. There are interdimensional beings, low vibration beings that are all around us that actually feed off of our negative emotions and our negative energy. He likens it to the movie The Matrix, where he says, hey, the AI is turning us into batteries. And he says, basically, that's what we are. We're in this Loosh machine where they want us to keep reincarnating and having these negative experiences and difficult lives. So we give off negative emotions, and then these entities are feeding off those emotions. And what he calls the Loosh machine, he's saying, okay, they're going to take our consciousness, our soul, as we exit and convince us to come back in the mix so they can keep feeding off of it. I don't know. I just don't see how these entities could then, if they're within this universe in the physical, how they would have authority or power or control over our energies, our consciousness when it's released. Like that just, I don't know. Like to me, I just can't fathom that. I feel like once you're back to pure consciousness, you're not going to be controlled by any entities within this universe, no matter how technologically advanced they are, or how powerful they are. I would feel like logically you would transcend all that. Again, I don't know.
Back into this reality over and over again. So it's like a self-perpetuating machine. And I set out in the books in detail how this seems to work, talking to people who've got memories and have experienced it and all that stuff. And that is that when you enter this astral dimension and you see the light or the tunnel with a light at the end, you think you're in some form of heaven, because compared with what you've just experienced, it seems to be. But there is a whole system, which ultimately this simulation is run by AI, a level of AI that makes human AI currently even look like the Stone Age. And you go on this, what the Buddhists call wheel of samsara, where you basically come out of the body, you go through a process and you come back in. And so they've set up this multi-level simulation system so that it's self-perpetuating. And the reason consciousness comes back in is because what it learns in its astral state is that it's got lessons to learn, and it must go back to pay back its karma.
We hear this in the teachings of, or the research I've read, Journey of Souls, Michael Newton's books on reincarnation, and it's a common theme throughout all of the regression hypnosis that he does in his work. Thousands of people who are totally unrelated all say the same thing, that once they've left the body and they're in this astral state, they've sort of chosen to come back to fix or work on something that heretofore was a deficiency in the previous life.
Yeah. And basically it's a load of old crap. And I tell you what I've noticed. I can come to something else I've noticed in a second, which relates to it. But what I've noticed is the relationship between humans in the human realm and to authority mirrors the relationship of consciousness, soul, if you like, in the astral in relation to authority. So people look to authority in the human world to tell them what to think and to tell them what to do. And overwhelmingly, they'll get their information from those sources, and they'll be guided by those sources. Oh, hello, doctor, I'm not very well. Please save me, doctor, and all these different institutions of authority. And then when they leave the body, this is a fascinating thing to me, because one of the common themes of a near-death experience is when they leave the body, they say, "It was amazing. I've never experienced anything like it." And then you say, well, you believe in reincarnation though now? Oh, yeah, reincarnation, yeah. So you must have experienced it lots of times then. So why have you never experienced it like this before? You must have done. And so that was my question. Well, how does that work then? And then I've come across information and talked to people who have a memory. They're not that many in number, but the common themes are very compelling. They have a memory of the incarnation process. They have a memory of the pre-incarnation process in the astral when they're about to come back. And they then have a memory of actually coming into the body. And what they talk about is that as you come in, you go through some sort of very powerful electromagnetic field that wipes your memory. Now, there are people, young kids mostly, that do remember previous lives in this reality, but they're comparatively few, and by about the age of 7, 8, it kind of disappears. But they do have memories, and they are absolutely phenomenally detailed, a lot of them. There's a guy I quote in my book.
Okay, so we're going to pause it right here, or end the clip right here. Okay, so let me see if I can summarize what he's saying. Number one, he's saying, why do people keep coming back? And he's talking about this idea of the memory being wiped. This is actually discussed in Journey of Souls and other NDEs as well. It's a intentional amnesia. The point is, as far as I understand, is your memory is wiped, or your connection to like all of this knowledge in the ethereal or whatever is intentionally wiped, so you come to earth tabula rasa and you can experience challenges without knowing everything there is to know. So it's meant, I think it's an intentional thing, and every time we enter into a life, you're, for the most part, those memories are severed, and you're coming in just with the memories that you accumulate or gather in this life. That's my understanding. So I don't see how that is necessarily evidence of the fact that this is like a manipulative push to continuously reincarnate just to feed a Loosh machine, and we're kind of like trapped in the cycle. That's not convincing to me. Now, maybe there's more that David Icke has researched and figured out in terms of like, hey, is this really a system within a system and we're really trapped? But that to me is not compelling. The other thing that I would take issue with is, if he's saying the entire purpose is to keep the Loosh machine going, why is it that, and by Loosh, I mean, again, negative energy, why is it that every near-death experience person, for the most part, that comes back always preaches a message of positivity? All I was told is the purpose of life is to love and to connect, and then they share that message. That would be antithetical to to these entities that are supposedly feeding off of negative energy. So, right, like, why would you be coming back and preaching this message? Why is it that these NDE folk are basically light entities? They're coming here to raise the vibration of the planet. That would seem counterintuitive. So that is what I am latching onto in terms of this, because this is a kind of like a scary thought to me, that we're sort of like still vulnerable to deception when we leave the body. Like I thought once you leave, you kind of, everything is understood. You're explained why you were here. No, you know what I mean? All those questions are answered, and there's no more deception. You're in a realm of pure light and love and truth, right? Truth, man. I think lies are real. People lying or being dishonest is really at the root of so many, if not all of the issues on this planet. But regardless, that's kind of what I come back to, in that what he's saying, it doesn't sway me, at least currently. Now, if I dove into his materials, and if like if this isn't just a coming from the idea of, oh, well, why would we come back? That doesn't make sense, therefore we're in a trap. I don't buy it. Like, that's not convincing to me. I think if there are things, just like we could make so many analogies on this planet, if there are things that we have to continuously work on and we choose to come back, that actually makes a lot more sense to me. Another thing that they talk about in Journey of Souls, and there's another book written by Michael Newton, or through the Michael Newton Institute as well, where it's like, you can also learn and grow in the ethereal. Like, you don't necessarily have to keep incarnating. And I know there's no time in that plane, but the way it was described was that you can amplify your progress when you come and incarnate and have a difficult life or challenge or whatever. You know, it speeds along your process. So a lot of times it's a voluntary thing, but you can choose to stay in the spiritual realm, if you will, and not incarnate. It's a choice. I don't know. Those are my thoughts. And I just had to share this with you because this has been quite distressing when I first heard about it. But then the more I've thought about it, I'm like, I don't know if it's really that convincing. So I want to share it with you guys. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Really, I want to know if this is convincing to you, persuasive in any way, or you feel like me where you're like, nah, it doesn't really add up. I'm not buying into this narrative. Although you have to give credit to David Icke for a lot of things, because it seems like at least this whole conspiracy theory he had about the elites on this planet seems to be coming true, which is insane. Anyways, that's all I got for you guys today. Thank you so much for joining, and we'll see you in the next video. Take it easy.